Did everybody get their coffee? It's super important because we're going to do some really heavy lifting in this next presentation. So brace yourselves. What we're going to talk about today is the fact that cybersecurity usually winds up sucking, not because we're not doing just the basics, which we're not doing, but also because we're not capable of meeting the pace of innovation, otherwise known as marketing. We're just not able to build new stuff without old vulnerabilities that keep seeping through. So we need to think about this very specifically when we want to think about embracing some of the advantages that are going to be there with quantum technologies. And what you might have heard about, if you kind of flip through some of the hypey stuff that's out there, are things around a quantum computer. Have you guys already heard or seen articles about, quantum computers being built and all the cool things they can solve? Well, you might have heard like different stories. You might have heard things like, we need a quantum computer because we're not actually evincing anymore Moore's law, but we're seeing the advent of something called Amdahl's law. And Amdahl's law says, in opposition to Moore's law, that you're not going to continuously get this exponential computing power, but that even though you keep adding more hardware, your actual total compute begins to decrease. Yeah, so it begins to ebb instead of continuously increasing. And, the cool thing about Moore's was obviously not only did we have like this exponential rise in computing power, but we had an asymmetric effect of decreasing costs. So that was like super attractive, but that could be a very viable use of quantum computers, that you're using them to solve very specific, hard to solve problems that need a lot of compute in order to get their shit done. The other thing that quantum computers are really good for are like really difficult problems or needle in the haystack problems, but they've been touted as doing much, much more. They've been touted as being able to have early detection of cancer, of solving climate issues, of figuring out how to do like advanced personalized medicines and protein folding better than AlphaFold or MetaFold or whatever folding thing you currently want to use. They're capable of doing all of this other stuff. At least that's the hype that we're seeing. So really cool. Again, these are not computers that we're going to see at home underneath your basement or that a CISO is going to leave unpatched underneath someone's desk. These are really computers that are being used for very specific scientific challenges. And when you take a look at the wider realm of all things quantum technologies, it's not just quantum computers that we need to think about. It's also the fact that when we have quantum technologies as an underlying basis, we also are looking at things like quantum simulators, which might get there in terms of doing all this cool compute even earlier than a computer actually will. And also things that we'll be using are quantum sensors. So if you're a company like Shell, you can use quantum sensors, for example, to look at the specific gravity of different places on Earth and then try to figure out where to drill for oil. More fossil fuels. I'm really kidding about that one, by the way. That was really a joke. So, but the point is that's what you can use, one of the uses of quantum sensors. You can also use it for more precise clocks, etc. And then furthermore, this idea that when we connect all of these quantum elements together, we can actually provide ourselves a much more foundationally transportation secure network that we are calling the quantum internet. And that seems to be a development that's genuinely progressing, at least from the perspective of Europe. In order to get there, though, we built this thing called the Quantum Technologies Flagship for the EU. There's only 3 flagships in the EU. Each flagship is roughly $1 billion, or euros, rather, €1 billion. And the Quantum Technologies Flagship is a little bit over €1 billion, 1.3. And I'm a vice chair of that flagship, and I tell you that it's not an easy thing to do because it's not just that you want to have this end goal of building all of these 4 areas. You also need a whole bunch of stuff that hasn't been discovered yet in terms of enabling science, as well as stuff to talk to the stuff that hasn't been invented yet, like the theory, like the algorithms, like the actual protocols that are going to be used when any of these inventions actually will take place. So there's a lot of work still to do in order to get where we want to go. And where we want to go is to be in a position, there's only 3 geographies that are competing in this space. Yeah, the first geography is the United States. Second geography is China. Third major geography is the EU. And the EU's ambition is to knock out one of those other 2 to be in the top 2 position for quantum. So who are we going to beat in Europe? Is it going to be China or is it going to be the United States? Because the goal for the EU is to make sure, scientific leadership, and also to make sure we have a competitive quantum industry so that we don't build companies that then later get bought by Google and then taken over. That IP goes over to the United States. And we also, though, while we want to have that happen, we still want to make Europe interesting for all kinds of foreign capital and foreign investments. And that goal of the quantum internet is not a small thing. And it's not something that we don't have a plan for. This is actually something that is happening right now in the background if you are taking a look. So this idea is to connect all of those things that we just talked about, computers, simulators, sensors, to build this quantum internet across all of Europe. And even here, the question is who's going to get there first. So one of the things that we know is that quantum computers specifically present a challenge to cybersecurity. So I'm in this group in the World Economic Forum where actually two groups. One group looks at how do we actually look for these opportunities? How do we take advantage of all of this quantum technology to make sure we have this like prosperous future and can use some of this cool stuff to indeed cure cancer or build a better drug the next pandemic round? And then also really figure out, okay, well, we also need to figure out how to get the cybersecurity threats mitigated so we actually can enjoy this. So again, this time we are meeting the pace of innovation. This time it's not being security bolted on, but built in so we can take advantage of whatever thing we're building afterwards. So I need to tell you this, and I apologize because these are like really old slides, but I need to tell you this. Everybody knows what a qubit is? Anybody not know what a qubit is at this point? Okay. So I love you. Thank you for raising your hand. So in computers, we know about this phenomenon of bits, right? Zeros and ones. And the idea with a qubit or a quantum bit is this phenomenon that you can have a superposition state of the 0 and 1 being there at the same time. You have to think of it, it's kind of crazy, but you have to think of it as a sort of opportunity space. So you can be a 0 and a 1 at the same time, superpositioned, until you're actually measured. And then in which case you are deterministic. You're a 0 or a 1. And what's really cool about this superpositioning is that with that superpositioning, you can take that 0 or 1 on one end, and you can do this really funky thing with quantum mechanics, which is called entanglement. You can take that 0 or 1 and entangle it with another 0 and a 1. So that 0 and 1 is 1 qubit. You entangle it with a second qubit, another 0 and 1. And basically, the way that you have to look at the system is, or any quantum computing system, is it's 2 to the n, where the n is the number of qubits you have. So if I have 2 to the qubits, 2 to the n, where n is the number of qubits, and I have 2, what number is that? 2 to the second is more coffee. More coffee. 4. Good. So how about if I add another qubit? All right, so I have 0 and 1, a 0 and a 1, and a 0 and a 1. So I have 3 qubits. So 2 to the third power is? Yes. All right, so guys, think about this. All right, if I have the fastest supercomputer on Earth with whatever flops of processing power, what do I need to double that speed? Or double the capacity of that of the supercomputer? Well, thank you. You're jumping 3 steps ahead. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. But in order to double the supercomputer that we would have had, in order to double that capacity, we need to build a second supercomputer next to it, right? But if I want to double the processing power of a quantum computer, all I need to do is add 1 qubit. Is this idea clear? Is it anyone still confused about why this is so fucking cool? All right. Good. There's some other principles that make this awesome, specifically for computer science, which is that there's a fragility no cloning principle with quantum mechanics. So all of these like quantum units, they're pretty finicky. They don't like it when you try to keep them stable and in their state. They do something called decoherence. They fall apart. And if you try to observe them, they fall apart. So that quantum state collapses. And you can't copy them either. So like a replay attack with any of these quantum mechanic principles would not work, right? So let's talk about why that is relevant when we take a look at it from a cryptographic principle. So we know all of our current cryptography, everything that we use right now, right? All of it. Pick your favorite algorithm. All of it is using some common, difficult to solve problems. And there are something called one-way functions, which means it's hard to solve in one direction, and its opposite is true. Like, it's easy to solve in one direction, hard to solve in the other. Yeah, so it's a difficulty of a one-way function. The only thing that actually determines how hard it is to solve is the time you have to solve it. Okay? So, integer factorization. Integer factorization is this idea that you can take two numbers, multiply them, get a product, but if you now want to reverse it and you only have the product and you want to figure out what got me there, it's difficult to do. I'll give you an example. Does anyone feel brave and want to volunteer for easy math? Easy math. Come on. Easy math. Oh, you're brave. Wonderful. All right. 9 times 8 is 72. Thank you. All of the products that you could get to 72, all the factors, that you can get to 72 are? So here's my point. No, it's okay. You've illustrated my point. This is the example of the one-way functions. 9 times 8, boom, 72. Give me now you have a product, 72. Now tell me all of the factors you could have used to get to 72. Oh, give me a minute. Right? And that's exactly how all of our current computing systems today work. With a quantum computer, they don't work that way anymore. And the reason they don't work that way is because there's this dude, Peter Shor and Love Grover, and Peter Shor basically figured out how to reverse integer factorization. Yeah? And Love Grover basically found a way to try multiple permutations at the same time, reducing the total amount of time you would need to find the right answer by doing certain computations simultaneously. Okay, so Shor and Grover make it possible for us to solve these two difficult math problems. Discrete logs is basically the example that I have here, which is otherwise known as clock arithmetic. It's the same principle. If you have the resulting answer, it is difficult to figure out the origin of the problem. Is this notion clear to everyone? All right. So what I'm telling you, in essence, is our current cryptography is weakened. It is broken because we have these algorithms that are waiting for a quantum computer so that they can actually execute on the promise of this attack to our current crypto systems. Is that clear? Okay, so, the recipe is algorithms plus quantum computer equals breaking our crypto. All right. But you've heard multiple speakers before me tell you no one is going to try the hard route. They're not going to look for some massively complex attack. They're not using AI ML. No, they're taking the easy routes. They're like trying to find what is the quickest way to get there. So more than likely, people are not going to go after the crypto systems. They're going to go after the fact that we have insecure hardware, insecure operating systems, insecure protocols, and applications. And usually, in order to get that, idea and sense of strong cryptography, you still need to be able to secure not only those preceding layers, but also have an understanding of what it is you're trying to protect and from whom. And most organizations don't. So, assuming that we have a really solid stack against I'm going to use Raj's word of sophisticated hacker, you still would need to get all of that right and still need to understand the level of, sophistication. And we know that stuff goes wrong, and it does go wrong all the time, really because people still like to roll their own crypto. Don't do it. Bad. Everyone can build something that they themselves can't break, but someone else can. So please do not roll your own crypto. We also know that there's concerted efforts to do all different types of cryptanalysis techniques, including traffic analysis, also building side channel attacks. And I love the idea of the brick, or in the KXCD comic, the wrench that can be used. So regardless of someone not giving you their password, the brick or the wrench will always work, right? So I really think we need to have a better understanding of what can go wrong if we want to get better at securing it the next time. Also, these are not, once in a while efforts or non-concerted efforts. They are structural and endemic in our current, and I don't want to say democratic institutions because everybody is doing this. They're looking for ways to do export restrictions. When I started working, my first job was looking at export restrictions on cryptography. We always have been looking at things like, hey, all right, if I can't control which good crypto goes out, then let me at least have that good crypto for myself. So key escrow, golden key stuff, the same thing that we saw with the iPhone, FBI, San Bernardino case. There's all kinds of different considerations because there's really shitty key management. And we know, like from, someone mentioned earlier, the GSMA, that's the mobile security, okay. Well, the GSMA has gone on record and been very open, actually, I think, about the fact that earlier GSM algorithms were asked to be weakened for law enforcement. So we do this stuff on purpose structurally. And then when we say don't weaken our crypto, the alternatives that we give to law enforcement to get their stuff done is look for vulnerabilities, look for 0 days, look for doing stuff on client-side attacks. And we don't ask them to structurally weaken the crypto for everyone. And this is the kind of balancing of equities, which we're not always great at, but we still need to find a better way to do this. And when you want to ask yourself, how secure are you or how much do you need to worry in light of all of the other challenges we have to have? By the way, I want to say something to you, and this is really in light of some of the previous speakers' comments as well. The biggest thing you have to remember if you really want to get security right is that there's no such thing as democracy in security. There's only friendly dictatorship. So if we want to get this done right, we've got to be the friendly dictators. And that means asking these questions and then being able to be in a position to effectively answer them. How long do we need to keep our secrets secret? How long? Does anybody work in healthcare? Okay. But if you think about healthcare specifically, it's not just your generation, it's a generation of your children as well. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to keep cryptography secure for a generation. It is not there. How long before there's a viable quantum computer that breaks our secrets? Within the group of scientists that I talk to through the quantum flagship, the worst case estimate is 40 years. Obviously, in that group of scientists, there are no quantum skeptics. When you speak to a quantum skeptic, they'll tell you we'll have cold fusion before we have a quantum computer. However, when you talk to the optimists, it's more terrifying because the notion that there already is a partially viable quantum computer, whether it's a computer, by the way, or a simulator, the bets are still off, but that is still being developed in some bunker somewhere. That's the real worry. And that timeline for it to be made public is between 5 and 10 years. That's the real challenge that we have. And then if that's the case, how long before we're ready? And it's not just us, right? It's every vendor we use on Earth. So it's the Microsoft, it's, forgive me, the Ciscos, it's everyone else that needs to get their stuff ready so that we can call ourselves quantum secure. So if we can answer all these questions, it doesn't matter how you spell it out. If you say you need to keep your stuff secure for a generation, if you say that we have 5 to 10 years, worst case estimate, before there's a viable quantum computer, and then you need to transition, and that will take a decade at least, because someone else mentioned IPv6 before. IPv6 is so old. Where are we with that? So I don't think we're great at change. So we're already screwed. We already should have started this 2 decades ago if we consider these answers. So if we take a look at when, well, it really depends on how long it takes us to actually do this factoring, depending on the size of the cryptographic key length and the amount of qubits that we have to our disposal. No matter how you slice it, if you take the NIST recommendation for RSA, it'll bring down the average time to break that key from, the lifetime of the universe to a couple of seconds with a quantum computer of size. And these are real concerns. So what I would like to ask you to do today is to think about how do we prioritize things that are important before they become urgent? Because we all love a good firefight. We all do. We're great at it in InfoSec, right? Woo! Get those things running. We're all charging to the incident. Yay! We feel again like we're heroes. We're saving you, right? We tell everyone when we shut down their stuff, we're saving you. Do you realize how stupid you are? But, I would like to ask us if we are so much smarter, let's prioritize things that are important. Let's keep up with the pace of innovation. Let's build it in and not bolt it on. And one of the phenomenon that we should know about is this capture now, decrypt later phenomenon. And the idea is, and this is a real photo, and there's one of several facilities of an NSA data center. This one is in the middle of Utah, several football fields long. And what this data center does is it captures copies of the internet. And it captures also the encrypted traffic with the assumption that at one point in time, there will be a capability to decrypt that traffic. And old secrets, subsequently, are just as good as new secrets. So this capture now, decrypt later problem means that everything that's ever been transmitted is already at risk. So we need to have a plan. All the old stuff is already gone. So that plan, and I'd like to ask you to just think about it in an incredibly pragmatic way. Put your religious convictions aside for a moment and just think about being an opportunist when it comes to security and using whatever's available to you to get it done. So first and foremost, what can we already do? We can increase that key length to make it harder, to make the cost of the attack go up because you need a more powerful quantum computer to actually break the keys. Okay, so figure out what crypto you're using and increase your current crypto length. If you're using AES, you're going to use 256-bit keys. Then we're going to investigate options for quantum key distribution. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And we're going to look at post-quantum algorithms, which I really believe is the most future-proof solution in this whole thing. So let's take a look at the impact. I talked to you about increasing key length. Well, this was the advice. This is also the advice, by the way, of several intelligence agencies of how you should look at this problem, which is that for AES and for SHA, you will need larger key sizes or larger output. But really, because of the key exchange mechanism, I am still convinced that this is not enough of this is okay. This is a tide me over action, but this is not enough of a mitigation for it to be anything other than a stopgap measure. Are we all clear on that? Okay, stopgap measure, but we're going to do this right away. And for all of the other stuff, RSA, elliptic curves, finite fields, gone, broken, smashed. And when we want to look at quantum key distribution, I want to introduce you to this phenomenon of what the hell is quantum key distribution. It's really simple. Alice, we know from our good old crypto days, Alice wants to talk to Bob, boyfriend, and does not want to be interrupted by Eve, jealous ex-girlfriend. Okay? So Eve wants to hang out, listen to the chats between Alice and Bob, but Alice and Bob were smart. They put a quantum channel in between them. And what that quantum channel really looks like is it looks like light, right? So what it is you have a single photon emitter on one side. Everybody has polarized sunglasses, or anyone has polarized sunglasses. Okay, so what you know is it lets light in one way, you twist it 90 degrees, it doesn't let light in the other way, right? That's why it sucks trying to read your dash cam or stuff with your polarized sunglasses, right? So basically, Alice has a set of polarizers. Bob has a set of polarizers. Alice needs to configure her polarizers in a particular way and then send that information over to Bob. When Bob has his configured the right way, he will get the information from Alice. If Eve is on the line trying to intercept this, basically, Alice will know Eve was on the line because Bob will get gibberish. Yeah? If Eve is on the line, Alice and Bob both know that they cannot communicate. Is this notion clear? Questions? It could be a denial of service. In fact, some of the most successful attacks against these types of QKD crypto systems are shining a bright light at either side of the detectors because it'll render them useless. Absolutely denial of service. But then you also know you can't communicate over that line, right? And the point is that what you want to know about is if you have a piece of dark fiber in the ground connecting Alice and Bob, was anyone ever on that line? And the fact is, once you set this up, you can verify almost the cleanliness of the line. This is just regular old-fashioned QKD. There's a ton of other flavors now. There's also entanglement-based QKD. There's MDI QKD. I don't have enough time to go through all of it. No, I totally get it. I'm totally over time. So So I'm just going to tell you, it's not that hard to do. Again, opportunistically, there's stuff that's rack and stack. You can pop it in. I did this when I was still at KPN as their CISO. I popped in a QKD box. I connected it between The Hague and Rotterdam, and we had a little connection. What we also tried to do is, together with the University of Delft, built an entire little quantum backbone for the Netherlands. And again, this is rack and stack. This is a university. So it's slightly different. And the clue is that it's a lot harder, excuse me, It's not COVID. COVID. I'm dying. So it's not rack and stack, but it will work, and it takes about a decade to get another one of these tables up and running. So the other thing you can do, which is also really cool with QKD, is you can do something called free space QKD, which is that you can actually do this without having fiber, because how many of you have dedicated fiber between you and everyone you want to communicate with? So you can do this over free space. Small limitation is sunlight, for obvious reasons, because, lasers, sun, confusing. And there's like water vapor. Excuse. I'm just going to die. Excuse me. And the thing that I believe in the most is post-quantum cryptography, which is reaching an inflection point. And where we are at that is we started basically a sort of thing from NIST to try to collect all different possible new algorithms with even a quantum computer could not be broken. The best shot at that is something called lattice-based cryptography. And I'm not going to explain lattices right now, but I'm happy to explain it to you after in the break. So the clue with lattice-based is that there are some really solid problems that even with a quantum computer cannot be broken. We just need to refine them so that they're still usable without incredibly large key sizes. So we came up with a bunch of candidates with round 4. And what you'll see is we had finalists, we had alternatives, and one of the alternatives was Psych. Unfortunately, Psych was actually broken. And it wasn't broken with a quantum computer, it was broken with a regular computer. And this is, again, another reason don't roll your own crypto, and it's really possible to break this. So that transition time that we need to inventorize which crypto do we need, think it through for implementation, make sure we've got policy areas, and start failing early is super important. One thing you should know when we look at the other side of the coin is that China ages ago already launched their quantum satellite. They have a 3,000 kilometer network where the EU spends $1 billion for a 10-year program. China spends $10 billion each year on quantum. So we're not going to win this because we're spending the most money. Okay. We've got to think about playing security Moneyball here. For those of you that have seen the film, just watch it for Brad Pitt. So we've got to play security Moneyball and be smarter, and not just win it because we've got more money thrown to it. And you should know that that program from the Chinese has spurred on a bunch of other programs of space-based quantum key distribution that have real potential for critical infrastructure. And the space-based QKD stuff can be used for other things. Maybe it'll be used as a bridge between terrestrial repeaters, or have additional gains for confidentiality into, the CIA triad, or mitigating specific risks. But we need to find the right use cases. One of them could be, for example, if we want to have the same type of growth in space as we do on Earth, despite having the Kessler syndrome, is we might want to think about having different constellations talk to each other, do reconciliation and billing, and be able to hand over data. Great example for QKD in space. One of the things that I also did at KPN is we did a presentation. It's available online with the European Space Agency to look specifically at which critical infrastructure use cases can we actually do to get this done. Again, take a look at the report. One of the annoying things is Vodafone already announced that they're going to be the first 4G network on the moon. So those of you that want to do stuff like that, I do tell you that there is going to be an entire infrastructure that's coming up in space. Although there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to cybersecurity in terms of resilience. And we need to think about how do we get better at building stuff with crypto agility as well as supply chain security, especially when we want to put stuff out there. An interesting thing that I hadn't considered, which I really got to mind because of my current boss, was the idea of Amara's law. That we tend, just like, when we take a look at the internet, for example, that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and then underestimate it actually in the long run. And it might be the case that we're doing this again for quantum. That we're overestimating its impact right now and then underestimating actually the real things it can bring us in the long run. What I would like to ask you to do, one thing, is to make sure that this time we're doing security at the pace of innovation. Thank you. We've apparently got time for one question. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? So in regards to, say, one of the big three, crack quantum computing, Do you think we'd know, or do you think it'd be more like the Enigma code?
I love your question. So I actually think I love this question because I do think it'll be like does everybody know, by the way, what he's referring to? Right? So the idea was that after Enigma was discovered, the UK had subsequently given examples of it to the Allies and said, we got this stuff from the Germans. It looks like it's good crypto. Use it. And actually, I was in the Dutch intelligence agency, well, like you are. And they have this little museum in the lobby. And in the lobby, they had this old example of an Enigma machine. And what was really cool was that they were using it for quite some time after Turing had already broken it. So, I mean, like, you have to imagine the Allies were all going ahead and using their shitty crypto, not knowing that one of their besties could crack it. So I do think that this will absolutely be the case when it comes to quantum. Whoever has the strategic advantage is not going to shout it from the rooftops because they want you to use the shitty crypto so they can listen to everything you're saying. Duh.
And I suppose just to follow up then, so do you think it would be a sequence of events that would prove that quantum has been cracked, or do you think it would all culminate in a cyber D-Day?
Cyber D-Day, wow.
Yeah, it's a good word.
No, I don't know. I think it's really difficult to prognosticate the future, so I don't know. What I'm just hoping is that we are a bit smarter and kinder, because what I do see happening are other things that I don't think are so good for scientific advancement. Look, of course we're going to screen countries, but we're now not allowing students to cooperate on research programs, and it's a consequence of our geopolitical shit. Okay, but I find it really killing. The whole purpose of science is like searching for honesty and truth, and we're fucking it up with our political nonsense. And we're not letting students work together. We're not letting companies work together. We're like, yeah, and maybe it's a bit naive to want to have this better, softer, kinder planet. But I'm hoping that we don't have Cyber D-Day. But I think that what behooves us is let's get, obviously, the basics right that we've talked about a couple of times, and let's also anticipate some of the stuff that's going to come down the funnel and just kind of get prepared. Look, if we're already having issues identifying and knowing which systems we use and which protocols we use on our network, we really don't know which cryptography we're using. And I find that really terrifying that we have no way to inventorize that now successfully across an enterprise. So if it is weekend, we are screwed. And even then, even with NIST, having a new set of algorithms, we need to be able to like plug it out and plug in another one just to have this crypto agility built in, because that could also fail us over time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just on the point of the science versus political nonsense, I was glad to see that even though you refer to it as a EU quantum flagship, the UK is still a part of it.
Yeah, so we were at a dinner at the British ambassador's residence where he said at the eve of Brexit that in terms of science, the UK, instead of tapping out, wanted to lean in. And specifically around science and joint projects. It is not easy, I have to tell you, because funding is always going to be a thing where it's like, what are you doing here? And but it is something that is clearly an ambition, is to, on those areas, try to find allies to cooperate with. And the cooperation, for example, in the Netherlands between the Dutch quantum program and like NIST is excellent. ETSI works closely with NIST in order to come up with European standardization. So I really believe that cooperation is our future. Only be careful who we cooperate with. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate this is a difficult subject. Thank you.